Hey guys, this is Brandy, otherwise known as Mystery of Diamonds, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hey y'all. Okay, so I know it's been a little bit, but we are going back to Forensic Fridays, and I'm doing something a little different this time. I'm still going to, you're going to see me diamond painting on something, and I still will tell the, because the last Forensic Friday I did, I still gave a mystery. I will still give the solution to that mystery here in just a few minutes after I finish my little introductions. And then I will go into the case. So what I decided to do is that I wanted to, rather than just cover these high profile cases, something that me and my kids do at my school when I teach my forensic science is that we do a Forensic Files Friday. And so what I thought I would do is I would take you through a case from Forensic Files. And then I still will do the mystery at the end. So if you'll watch, I'm going to watch. If you haven't watched that last Forensic Friday, I will try to put it up in the eye here so that, if you don't want to have a spoiler of what the mystery was, you can go back and watch that and see what the mystery is, because that's one I'm fixing to give the answer to, and then I will get into the case and then the other mystery. So let's get going. Okay, so the solution to the mystery that I had read last time, which was the Forensic Files episode 5, was this. Gordon Pape has recognized that by balancing 6 balls in the first use of the scale, 3 on either side, the FDSOP agent will need only 1 more to find the heavy ball. If in the first weighing it is one of the 6, then the side it's on will come down. The agent will then know it's one of the 3 on that side. For the second weigh, he balances 2 of the 3. If they're equal, the sabotaged one is the third one. If the bad one is one of these 2, that side will come down. If in the first weighing of 6, the 2 sides balance, then the bad ball is one of the remaining 2. Now, this one was more of a, logistics problem one, but still kind of fun, right? I hope, anyway. All right, so as I said, we're doing this a little bit differently. And so what I have is we're going to go through a forensic file. Now, this episode is called If I Were You. Okay, so some parts are it's going to be a little different for me because, like I said, I haven't done this before except with my students, but I mean, not really go through the case myself. We've watched it. All right, so in rural Idaho, a retired school teacher vanished. Even though he was missing, his bills were paid on time, and he continued to correspond with his family. But they couldn't contact him, making this one of the most bizarre missing persons cases in U.S. history. So Paul Gruber was a teacher, one of the most popular teachers in Encino High School near Lake Tahoe, Nevada, for 22 years. He had a huge passion for travel, and he loved learning about foreign languages. In fact, his daughter talked about that they would go to all these different places and speak the language of that place. And he emphasized very much that it was one of the benefits of learning a foreign language is that you could travel the world, excuse me, and that you could take care of yourself. And that was something that she really remembered. She actually remembered a time that she went to Mexico with him her junior year of high school. She says that was fun. We went dancing. It was kind of embarrassing, but anyway, we had a good time. When he was in his early so she actually really enjoyed going to these places with her father because he had such a zest for life and learning all these foreign languages. So he taught her to really appreciate the culture and look at the culture where you're from or where you're going. So when he was in his early 50s, he had inherited some money, and so therefore he retired from teaching. And so he moved to Sandpoint, Idaho, and he bought a home on the shores of Muskrat Lake. And his daughter said that he really liked the slow pace of this town. And, when she first saw Sandpoint, she was like, I don't see why he liked it, but it had that same Lake Tahoe feel, she said. Then shortly after Christmas in 1993, Paul sent his 3-year-old grandson a birthday card, which was normal for him. That was what he usually did, was send birthday cards. But the problem is that his daughter noticed something really strange immediately. And she noticed that this card was different from others that he'd sent. First off, she said it was a really brief note inside of the card, and that wasn't usual for him. And usually he sent very affectionate notes, and this one wasn't very affectionate. And so something just made her think, wow, this doesn't seem right. Something's wonky, and so she just gave her a red flag. So what she did is she pulled out all of his old birthday cards that she had gotten. She started comparing it to this new one. And she said, it doesn't even look like his signature to me. You know how we can tell that it kind of looks like I know that I can take a look at a note that my mom wrote, and I can tell you my mom wrote it. Someone else could try, but I could tell if it's my mother's handwriting. And so, that kind of, she's like, this doesn't even look like his signature. So she called and she left a message for her father at his home in Idaho. And something that's very uncharacteristic for him, he didn't return the phone call. That's very weird because usually he always called her back. So she, now at this point, she's worried. So she called the local police department and she asked them if they could check on how her father's doing, check on his welfare. So the police went there and they didn't find anybody home. They didn't find any evidence of a break-in. But when they looked inside, almost everything inside the house was gone. Gone. It's empty. And Detective Sergeant Valdez said that there was a total absence of personal items, clothing, toothbrush, hairbrush, nothing. It was just totally vacant. It was like no one had lived there or someone had rented the house out, and had left it blank until the next renter. And so, they noticed that all the valuable stuff was gone. So his daughter, Shelly, I forgot to say her name. Shelly decided she wanted to set a trap. She wanted to see if, some of the stuff going on was her father or not. So she decided to set a trap. So what she did is she left a bogus message on her father's answering machine. And she was reminding him to not forget her husband's birthday. And so she sent the message, can you please send the money that we had discussed? And the prosecutor said, I think she was just kind of trying to think up something so that she could see what would happen. Obviously, she didn't talk to the police about this beforehand. She just kind of said, she did this, she set this trap on her own. She wanted to see what would happen. So then, sure enough, 5 days later, she got a birthday card, supposedly from her father, for her husband, and a $25 check. Now, she knew that her dad had never promised to send a check for her husband. That was why she set the trap. She knew that her father had never said, I'm sending a check for the husband. And in fact, it wasn't even the husband's birthday. So this is how she knew this wasn't her father who sent this card. Because her father would have known, wait a second, it's not your husband's birthday. And I didn't promise to send you money. And so that led her to believe that something had happened to her dad. So an Idaho State Police forensic document examiner took a look at the handwriting on the check and the handwriting on the birthday card and the envelope, and they compared it to Paul Gruber's known handwriting samples. When the handwriting analysis actually came back, the examiner said that it did appear to be Gruber's handwriting, but his daughter and family said no, I don't care what the examiner said. This is not my father's handwriting. This is not his writing. So, that's when they wanted to investigate some more. So they started making some more phone calls. And And police did check his financial transactions, and they discovered the thing is he'd been paying his monthly bills on time. He wasn't late with his bills. He was paying his bills. He was using his ATM card all around town to be able to get cash. Now, thing is that all the ATMs that he went to, none of them had a camera on them. None of them got a picture of the person using the ATM card. And they thought that was a little odd, right? You know, like to be able to go to all the different ATMs that don't have a camera on it so that you can't see who it is that is pulling out money. So was this a coincidence? If he was okay, then where was he living? Why didn't he call his family back? And so his daughter was just convinced that something sinister had happened to her dad. And so on a hunch, she called the post office in Sandpoint, Idaho, and asked them who was picking up her father's mail from his P.O. box. And there actually was a security camera in the post office to be able to see who was picking it up. Now, unfortunately, somebody had kind of knocked the security camera off a little bit, so it wasn't exactly pointed in a direction where you could really see as much of the face and everything. So all that they got off of the camera was a silhouette of the person who entered in and went to the P.O. box. Now, thing is, the silhouette was not Paul Gruber. It did not look like Paul Gruber. And in fact, to some people in the town, they showed the silhouette around to a couple of people, and they're like, hey, that kind of looks like 43-year-old Daryl Cool. He was a local handyman, and he had actually been doing work for Paul. And so they compared the picture, the picture of Cool to the silhouette, and from what they could tell, and it kind of confirmed, yeah, it looked like Cool. Cool, from what they could tell, had lived in California and possibly in Washington. He had a large family. He had a wife, and he had like 6 or 7 kids. And the thing is, Cool admitted that he had been picking up Paul's mail. He said that Paul asked him to do it before leaving for a trip to Canada. So investigators showed Cool a photo of Paul, but when Cool looked at it, he said, that's not Paul. That's not Paul Gruber. That's not the man who asked me to pick up his mail. And so somebody, at this point, the detectives are like, well, somebody pretended to be Paul to Daryl, and they hired him to be a caretaker. So they talked to Cool and asked him to give them an artist sketch of the person who was asking him to be the caretaker, and said that he was Paul. So they wanted to be able to see what this person looked like. So they took the description, they keyed it into a computer program called CompuSketch. What they do, they take details that the person who's describing someone gives, and it tweaks it, and they're able to take a look and come up with a composite sketch in the computer. And so Detective Swanson said that he was entering the answers that was provided to the question so the computer could take those answers and generate a sketch. And then when they showed it to Cool provided feedback so that they could continue to improve the likeness. And so Swanson said, in order to be able to do this CompuSketch, he said, I want to change one item at a time. That way, if it's the nose that's a problem, we can pinpoint the nose. Or if the eyes don't match the nose, we can pinpoint that. It could be an average of an hour to 2 hours to go through all that. So when they were finished, the police released that composite sketch to the media so they could get it on TV, so they could try to find the man who had assumed Paul's identity, but they didn't get any phone calls. There were no hits. And so months went by, and there was still no sign, no call of Paul Gruber. So at this point, we still didn't know where Gruber was. They hadn't located him, and they weren't even sure if anything had happened to him, right? All they had was his daughter being concerned, the the birthday cards coming and not seeming like she wasn't convinced that something wasn't wrong. So they decided to keep an eye on Paul's house. They searched the property repeatedly. They even used cadaver dogs to see if they could smell decomposing body, because cadaver dogs are generally used when they want to be able to determine if there is a body decomposing somewhere nearby, or if there was a body that was decomposing and then moved. Cadaver dogs are good at being able to scent that. They didn't see anything. There was something that was inside the house that bothered Detective Valdez. There was a small rug that was in the foyer, and for some reason this rug had been glued to the floor. Like, instead of it just being laid down on the floor, it was glued to the floor, which seemed a little odd, a little strange, a little out of place. So they tore it up, and under the rug they found a small gouge in the flooring that the rug was covering up. And what it looked like to Valdez was that a bullet had ricocheted and hit the floor and gouged that part of the floor. So they did tests of the wood there to see if they could detect any traces of lead, because if it had been a bullet, there would be maybe some traces of lead around there. And they also used luminol, and luminol is a compound that when sprayed on blood will fluoresce in UV light, and it'll show this fluorescent. But even if blood is not present, sometimes other compounds can also make it, like bleach can make this huge, but it'll be a different type of fluorescing. And so they used luminol, and what they discovered was that there had been blood on the floor near the bullet mark, or the bullet chunk, as well as other places. And so Valdez said they searched near the door, and they could see that there were marks about halfway up the door. And the thing is that even if you use bleach, because a lot of people go, okay, well, I'll clean up the blood using bleach. But even if you use bleach, that sticks out really well, as like very significantly, just as much as blood does, because it leaves like this pattern that fluoresces a little bit brighter, and it also has more of a uniform appearance. And so it's a little weird if there's like a whole bunch of bleach on one area and there's not on the other areas. It's kind of like, why this one spot, right? And so then they did DNA test, and it proved that the blood that was left behind was Paul Gruber's blood. So if there was his blood there, then where was his body? So the problem is that there's not necessarily enough blood to say that it was a murder, but there is blood there. It is Paul Gruber's blood. There is no body, but so at the same time, they can't actually prove from this that that Paul is dead. Now, as for Daryl Cool, he was well respected in the community. He had no criminal record, but they decided, they needed to kind of look into his finances, right? So they took a look into his finances, and they showed that a recent deposit for over $20,000 went into his checking account. And at that exact same time, there was a similar amount that was withdrawn from Paul Gruber's account. So a little over $20,000 was withdrawn from Paul's account at the same time that it shows up mysteriously in Daryl Cool's checking account. And so they asked Cool about it, and he did admit to transferring Paul's money into his checking account, but he did that so that he could pay Paul's bills. He said he was being asked to do that, like that Paul had said, I need you to pay my bills, but while I'm gone. It seemed a little strange to the detectives. It didn't ring true. Like, it seemed like off. Like, it didn't seem like it fit together. And the detectives were like, look, I don't have friends who I'm going to go pay their bills for them at $500, $600 a whack. Like, even if they gave me money and said, hey, I'm going to Mexico for a month, I need you to pay my bills. Like, it sounds weird. Not very many people are going to take on that responsibility of paying the bills for, I mean, like some people would, but it just, I don't know, it didn't ring true to them. So at this point, they're back to the only evidence that they have is the birthday cards and the checks that Paul sent to his family while he was missing. And so since the first expert said it was consistent with Paul's writing, they sent it to another forensic examiner in order to get a second opinion. That's not unusual. A lot of, there are times where they just want to make sure that they are getting accurate data. And so sometimes they will ask for a second expert to take a look at it to either corroborate or to see if there's a difference of opinion. And so that brings us to Robert, and this is the second forensic examiner, and he said once that he knew what the signature looked like, what his subconscious characteristics were, he took some of the question material, he looked at it, and it actually did not take him long to see that it was counterfeit, that it wasn't valid. And he said the most striking part of the examination was writing of the letter P, because Paul Gruber had consistently used a large loop when signing his letter P. But when looking at the question documents, the loops on the P's were very different from the loops that Paul Gruber normally had on his P's. They weren't as well formed. They were completely missing the loop, or they were elongated instead of this. Paul Gruber's P had this very roundedness to it, and these had more oblong to them. And the expert also noticed that Paul wrote his M's and N's much differently in the question document. So in other words, Paul's normal writing of M's and N's looked very different from M's and N's in these sent birthday cards and check that while Paul was missing that the daughter got. And so this expert actually concluded that Paul did not write these documents. Now, however, he did say that it seemed like that whoever had done this, whoever had written these, had taken a lot of time to practice to duplicate and try to duplicate the victim's signature because they did look very close. So someone had been practicing and practicing to try to get the handwriting, the signature, to be as close as possible. The problem is that there is a lot more writing that goes into writing on a birthday card and writing out a check than just the signature. So the problem is that all they copied, all they practiced really was the signature, that there were still characteristics of Paul's handwriting that when writing the notes for the birthday card, writing the other parts for the check, and then address as well, all of these things came into effect, and they did not match up. So the next thing that the expert did was he examined Darrell Coole's handwriting, and he noticed that he used the same closed loop on the capital P and other capital letters, and he wrote his F's in virtually the exact same way as the card supposedly sent by Paul to the grandson and the checks. And so he concluded that Coole was the person who wrote the birthday cards and who forged the checks. So that led investigators to now search Darrell Coole's property. And they actually found some incriminating evidence when they did this. They found some camouflage type clothing. They found some throwing stars, a katana, which is a curved sword. But all of it seemed kind of weird. Like, it didn't seem to match with the persona that Darrell Coole had, this family man, this father, a Mormon. They also found power tools, furniture. They even found a boat that was actually identified as being Paul Gruber's boat. They found a small suitcase that had Paul's Sunday clothes. It had a large butcher knife, and in the middle of all of that was one of Paul Gruber's power bills. The most alarming piece of evidence that they found was a .22 caliber handgun that had a homemade silencer on it. And silencers are illegal because they can alter the ballistic evidence. So what this means is that, so sorry, forgive me. On the gun, it had, if you want a silencer to be able to muffle the sound of a gunshot, right, you can put something on there to dampen that sound. Here's the problem, is that when you do that, it also, when the bullet comes out of the gun, it tries to go, it goes through the silencer and it alters the bullet and takes some of the rifling that comes from the gun and alters it some as well. And so that's why they're illegal, because they want to be able to match up what they call ballistics. They want to be able to match up bullets to guns fired. So they took a look, they gave it to a firearms expert, and he took a look at the microscopic evidence that was on the bullet by the barrel itself. And when they do it, it's usually obliterated, or it's a little bit misaligned because of the silencer. And that's different to a bullet that comes from a gun when there's no silencer put on it. And so they did pay attention to what the bullet looked like. So the problem is they still did not have a body. Okay, so they've got all this evidence mounting up and there's still no body. So 18 months after Paul disappeared, investigators searched his house again. You know, a lot of times people think that when you go to a crime scene, or when they're investigating a crime scene, that they go in one time, they get all the evidence, and then they leave. And that's actually not the case. A lot of times, until certain cases hit a certain point, or until they feel that they no longer need to go back to investigate the crime scene, it will stay a crime scene. So they searched it again, but this time in a basement crawl space, they found a shallow depression in the dirt that wasn't there prior, as far as, because the ground had not settled. And so when the ground had settled, they saw this depression. And Detective Valdez said that they worked for 2 days. They shifted every 5-gallon bucket full of dirt, and they did a grid search. So what they did is they went through and they sectioned off the area, like they made it look like you had this grid. It went like you had these little bitty squares going across, and so they went square by square, a couple of feet at each square, and they did this in a pattern so that they could actually say, okay, the evidence that was found here was found in this grid, so that they had a better idea of what had happened. And they said they finally exposed what appeared to be an air mattress, and then eventually confirmed that within that air mattress there was a body. So after 18 months, Paul Gruber's body was found in his basement, inside of in the crawl space, in a air mattress. The body was identified as Paul Gruber. He had been shot 4 times, and the medical examiner removed several .22 caliber bullets from his body, but they didn't match the test fires from Daryl Kuhl's gun. Okay, the .22 caliber handgun silencer, which can still give characteristics on the bullet itself. Now, the problem is that any slight change in the position of that silencer relative to the weapon is going to cause the bullet to strike a different part of the silencer from shot to shot. And so it moves it, so it's not consistent from shot to shot. And when that happens, you're not going to be able to make a conclusive identification from that, simply because of having that silencer on there. So even with that piece of evidence not being able to be used, they still had more than enough evidence to charge Daryl Kuhl with murder. Now, after they charged him, after they got him, his very first order of business when he gets in jail is to try to plan his escape. You know, he doesn't want to be in jail. So he decides to plan his escape. So an inmate testified that Daryl had offered him money and the car, that was Paul Gruber's, by the way, to kill the prison transport officers who were taking Daryl back. Because this person was getting out of jail before Daryl was going to be transported. And so Cool thought that he was soon going to be a free man. But the investigators knew better because they got a heads up from this person. So the two officers that were doing the transport said that they told Daryl, we know about your plot to have us killed. Those guys that you tried to get to kill us, they turned state's evidence. And he said he was crushed at that point. In other words, these guys decided, you know, hey, wait a second. If we give you this information, they turn state evidence that actually can help them in their case. They can give them leniency on certain parts or things like that. So, yeah, they turned on Cool, and Daryl Cool was crushed. So prosecutors believe that Daryl orchestrated an elaborate plan to kill Paul and to steal his money. Apparently, Paul had hired Daryl for handyman work around the house, and so he gained his confidence that way. And so sometime after Christmas, prosecutors believe that Cool went to Paul's home armed with his .22 caliber handgun. He shot him 4 times. One of the bullets missed, and it ricocheted off the floor, and that's where we see the gouge in the wood. The luminol test showed that he dragged Paul's body into the crawl space, that he wrapped him in the plastic and buried him underneath his own house. He cleaned the blood up from the floor, and then he glued the rug over that gouge so that it wouldn't cause any concerns that was created when the bullet ricocheted. And so now he figured with Paul dead, now he had uncontrolled access to Paul's records. He had his ATM cards. He had his PIN number, his checks, his social security number. He had everything that he needed to assume Paul's identity. And so he kind of wanted to maintain Paul's identity. So he started writing checks in Paul's name, and he withdrew money from Paul's accounts and put it into his own. His handwriting may have fooled one expert, but it didn't fool his daughter, which then is what brought them to eventually be able to take it to a second expert who knew, because his daughter said this is not his handwriting. She knew right away. And she's the one that set a trap by leaving inaccurate information about her hubby's birthday on her father's machine. Cool fell into the trap by sending the birthday card on the wrong date. He had tried to keep the persona of the victim alive so that he could extract more funds from the victim. At his trial, Daryl insisted he was innocent, and he denied signing Paul's name on his checks. He denied sending cards to Paul's family. He pointed at, he said, look, the first examiner knew that it was Paul's handwriting, said that it was Paul's handwriting. And so the prosecution asked the scientists they said, okay, fine. You know what? We're going to go one further. They swabbed the back of the stamp on the birthday card, because this was one of the stamps where this was back a little bit earlier, where you licked the stamp and put it on the envelope. And what they found was that the saliva, the DNA from the saliva on the back of that stamp matched that of Daryl. So therefore he couldn't get out. Sure. Okay. So the first expert said that the handwriting's not yours. However, you licked the stamp that put this card on there. You sent this card. So it was a 3-week trial, and Cool was convicted of first-degree murder, grand theft, and forgery, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So that is the case. Now, if you're interested in actually seeing that case, the name of that case is If I Were You. Like I said, this was a little different. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me go through. I'm hoping maybe you could kind of see what happened in your head. please, please, please let me know, do you enjoy how this was? Because if so, I plan on having a lot more of the doing the forensic files cases and taking you through the case, taking you through the evidence that was found, because I like how they actually talk about the specific forensics that are involved in the case. So I really would appreciate y'all's opinion. Okay, so are you guys ready for your mystery? Okay, so ready for the mystery. Go ahead, Connie Mount smiled indulgently at her husband and nodded at the CB radio. Frank was itching to turn up the volume and set the tuning a little finer. What they were hearing was too interesting to ignore. Do you want to drive? She added, taking her hands off the steering wheel momentarily. No, Frank replied, both hands on the CB dial. Let me fiddle with this thing. Frank Mount had left the police force 5 years earlier, in body, but not in spirit. When they pulled onto the freeway a few seconds ago on their way to a holiday weekend, the CB had already been set to the police band. But because the adjustment was incorrect, Frank and Connie had heard only intermittent bursts, excited chatter. Semi. Microwaves. 10 minutes. South Road. On the repeat, however, they had heard it all. Smokey, you got your ears on? This is dispatch at Byron Transport. I got a hot load. Semi's full of microwaves. Stole it right out of the yard 10 minutes ago. Went south down Service Road. You getting this? Frank looked up at Connie. That's Mike Dunn. He's calling right on air. That's smart. It takes too long to phone. Whoever's got that truck, once they're on the freeway, they'll be mighty hard to find. Byron puts out over 50 semis all at once this time of the morning. There just isn't enough patrol to check them all. Patrol Center, that is, only has 2 black and whites in both directions anyway. Yes, of course, Connie was catching the excitement. And Byron is entirely standardized, she said. The trucks all look exactly the same, don't they? As though to prove her point, a pair of identical trucks blasted their air horns at each other as they met in opposite directions. The southbound was immediately followed by 2 more. This is 201 Patrol, Byron. I hear you. Frank relaxed a little. A patrol car had already picked up the call. I'm coming right up the access of Service Road and the freeway. None of your rigs here right now. 201, this is Patrol Center. Set a block. We're sending help. Frank relaxed even further. The roadblock will get him, he said. That was fast. What if the truck turns off first? Connie wanted to know. Not off service, Frank explained. The only streets are residential, too small for a semi. They'd be trapped. Connie wasn't satisfied. But what about the alternate freeway access they put in last year because of all the traffic jam-ups? Mike Dunn's voice came tumbling in on top of hers like an echo. Byron here. Are you blocking the alternate? Patrol Center, Byron. You can't get a semi through that underpass on the alternate. Don't be. Mike Dunn's transmission was lost in a burst of erratic static. Is that right, Frank? Connie was completely involved now as her husband was. Frank seemed less certain than the voice at Patrol Center. It's supposed to be a cars-only design. Come to think of it, wasn't it a Byron truck that tried it once and got halfway through before it stuck? Connie didn't answer. She had pulled into the passing lane and was concentrating on a semi-trailer just ahead. The big green on white letters proclaimed Byron Transport Company. Almost in the same second, she and Frank understood. Wow. Clever, Connie whispered. Don't get too close. Just keep them in sight, Frank said hurriedly. He reached for the CB and turned the switch to send. I'll try to raise Patrol Center. So why do Frank and Connie believe they've located the stolen truckload of microwaves? So let's see if you can answer that question. So I'm fixing to take you to the end of the video and to the things, but once again, please, I am begging you, let me know how you liked this version of Forensic Fridays. I hope that you've enjoyed it, so let's get back to the end of the video. Okay, well, we got a little bit of our dragon notebook done. I want to apologize if it's been blurry during it. It's kind of hard for me to see right now, but I just want to say thank you. I hope that you enjoyed the forensic case. I hope that you will make a comment on the mystery. Now remember, what I want you to do is, yes, I'd love for you to comment on what you thought about the case, but also I'd like to hear your answer to what you think the answer or the solution to the mystery is in the comments down below. And I just want to say thank you so much. If you've liked this video, please hit that thumbs up button down below. And if you haven't subscribed, I would love for you to subscribe and become part of my Diamonds Dragon family. We try to have fun here. And this is just one of the little things that I try to do is this Forensic Friday. And I am definitely going to keep trying to work at getting this out to you every Friday. If I can't get it out every Friday, then I'll get it out you know, every other Friday. But I'm certainly going to continue to try to put this out. But if you do subscribe, please make sure you hit that bell icon for all notifications so that you know anytime that I upload or anytime that I go live. I normally go live on Monday nights at 7 o'clock Central Time. I hope to see you guys there. Alright, well, I'm going to leave you like I always do. Reach for the stars, grab hold on, and never let go. Until my next video, bye guys.